Hello, space friends. Captain Snuggles here, popping into your video feed for a quick discussion of some X4 facts that I've recently learned. You might think of this as a soft correction of my balance and difficulty video, because although this doesn't change the core thesis of that video at all, I did get one detail wrong. For at least a few years, X4 players have been noticing that there's a correlation between the game seed and the strength and frequency of Xenon invasions. Since game seeds are randomized when starting a new campaign, and since Xenon invasions are one of the main drivers of game difficulty, that essentially means that the difficulty of each run is randomized, to a certain extent. Over time, some people in the community started referring to this mechanic as Xenon aggression. Over more time, people started to refer to it as a setting associated with the game seed. And over even more time, people started saying that there were identifiable lines of code within the save file that corresponded to the save's Xenon aggression setting. As it turns out, that last part is 100% a rumor, and there are elements of rumor in the rest of it as well. I unknowingly picked up those rumors and repeated them in my balance and difficulty video, but thankfully, Egosoft likes to keep an eye on me, and two of their devs quickly chimed in to correct me. They were kind enough to answer a few of my questions, giving me a better understanding of the topic, and now I'd like to share that understanding with you all. My exact statement last time was that X4 has, quote, one difficulty setting, but that setting is hidden, it's selected randomly at the start of each run, you don't find out what it's set to until you're at least 10 hours into the run, and there's no way to adjust it without mods. That setting is Xenon aggression, and out of all the game design choices of all time, it is certainly one of them. End quote. Again, there are elements of truth and elements of rumor here. Game seed does have a random effect on difficulty, which only fully manifests around 10 hours into the game. It is not accurate to call that effect a setting, and it also isn't quite right to call it Xenon aggression. That said, at the risk of angering Katrar again, I would still call it one of the game design choices of all time. So, what do I mean by that? Let's break it down. First, the mechanic itself. Game seed impacts numerous aspects of universe generation. Many of those impacts affect the strength of individual Xenon sectors and clusters relative to their neighbors, often in indirect ways, by subtly changing the strength of both sides at important points on the map. For example, in this seed, the Zyarth Patriarchy never suffered a single major loss in 6 runs of 19 hours each, despite Zyarth being notoriously weak against the Xenon. The reason was this right here. This refinery, right next to a defense platform, right next to a fleet rally point. Those overlapping defenses allowed Zyarth to shrug off Xenon attacks at this critical conflict point, preserving their forces and their supply lines, indirectly strengthening them on other fronts as well. Meanwhile, a few jumps away, the situation was very different. Only one station spawned on the transit route from Matrix number 9 to Profit Center Alpha, and that lone station consistently fell in about 10 hours, leading to Xenon capital ships flooding into Teladi space. So, in the same seed, we're seeing opposite effects on Xenon invasions due to good and bad spawning locations or faction defenses. The same thing happens in Xenon space with Xenon defenses. There are similar variations in fleet compositions, ship distributions, station stocking, and a few other factors, all of which can have similar contributions to the local balance of power. Just to be clear, none of this is deterministic. In some runs, the Zyarth refinery did fall, which could have eventually led to the other defenses falling. And, in some runs, the Xenon capitals in Teladi space were intercepted by defense patrols before they could deal serious damage to the economy. So, there is a spectrum of possible outcomes, and the spectrum broadens over time as more and more dice are rolled. But the game seed's universe generation does make certain outcomes more likely, especially in the early game. Now, why shouldn't we call this Xenon aggression? Well, there's no ongoing active effect in the code that makes the Xenon more or less aggressive. This is just one-time universe generation, right at the start, and it affects more than just the Xenon. So, Xenon aggression is really a poor name for this. I'd suggest something more like initial balance of power. And why shouldn't we call this a setting? Well, this is partially a matter of semantics. There are other games with actual settings that function very similarly. For example, Stellaris has an adjustable difficulty setting called Advanced Empires, which grants a certain number of empires a certain amount of extra resources, ships, and technology at the start of the game. You might think that, since X4 can randomly do the same thing, the initial balance of power could also count as a setting. There's certainly an argument to be made there, but I'd say that the key distinction is that Stellaris groups its universe generation parameters together and adjust them together to produce a known outcome, making the campaign more or less difficult. In X4, on the other hand, the parameters aren't grouped. They all get generated independently. Moreover, based on my conversation with the devs, it seems like grouping them isn't even possible, because even Egosoft can't predict the effects that different combinations of different parameters will have on game difficulty due to the huge amount of RNG that takes place after universe generation. So, again, this is partly a matter of semantics, but I'm inclined to call this just a collection of parameters rather than a discrete setting. Now, with all those technical definitions out of the way, we can talk about everyone's favorite thing, Snuggles' unsolicited opinions. And my unsolicited opinion is that this is a genuinely baffling game design decision. I'm not a game designer, but I do know that player agency and universe creation is a hallmark of the sandbox genre. After thinking through it about 20 times, I can't see any reason why giving players that agency wouldn't work well in X4, and I can see a whole lot of reasons why it would work well. So, my conclusion is that Egosoft has set the game up this way not for game design reasons, but for artistic reasons. They have a vision for their universe, and they're willing to make some gameplay sacrifices in order to achieve that vision. And that's fair. It is their universe. They can do what they want with it. So, sure, I can sort of wrap my head around subjecting the players to uncontrollable random difficulty. What's really crazy to me is that Egosoft has chosen to subject its own devs to that same randomness. Again, I'm not a game designer, but I am a scientist. I know a thing or two about collecting meaningful data. I know that it would be way easier to balance the game if difficulty could be at least partially controlled instead of being random, because that randomness dramatically increases the amount of data that needs to be collected. Now, I'm sure the devs have something under the hood to help them collect that data faster than us players can, but they were emphatic that there's no unifying hidden setting for game difficulty, at least not as it relates to the Xenon. And I think that's insane. But it seems like Egosoft is committed to that insanity, so if we just accept that and take a step back, it does make a lot of their other balance decisions make sense. In Ketrar's words, their main balance priority is stuff not collapsing. They can't balance every single minute aspect of the game, so they paint in broad strokes, making balance decisions that address only the most outstanding problems with a high likelihood of success. For example, making sure players can win against the Xenon by just giving graviton turrets pathetically short range. Or making sure NPC factions don't collapse too early by just slapping down some extra defense stations right on top of the Xenon gates. And of course, they're making some more fine detail adjustments as well, like gradually tweaking the AI. They're just making those adjustments very slowly because they have to collect thousands of hours of test data to playtest each one. Again, I really do think that a lot of the eccentricities in X4's game balance make sense in the context that Egosoft is fully committed to its creative vision of a randomized living universe, not just for its players, but for its devs as well. So, there you go. This has been a deep dive into game seeds, random difficulty, and my opinions about them. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you'll tune in next time. And until then, this is Captain Snuggles, signing off.